We're going to have some family friends speak, and I believe we've changed the order, so I believe Josh is coming first. Is that right?
First, let me extend my deepest sympathies to Greg's family. Peyton, I said I wasn't going to look at you. Nick, Mike, Dottie, Shelley, and Greg's entire family. There's no speech or ceremony that can ease your pain, no tribute or salute. But today we do join together to honor Greg's courage and to fill your hearts with our community, our state, our nation's gratitude. As you endure this loss and this pain, please know that we hurt with you. To the law enforcement community that came to the aid of the Terre Haute Police Department, the FBI, and the community in their time of need, I thank you guys, everybody, from the bottom of my heart. To Greg's law enforcement family, the Terre Haute Police Department, the FBI, the Vigo County Sheriff's Office, all the law enforcement agencies that worked with Greg, please be there for one another in this time of need. Tell stories, give each other hugs, and may God be with all of you. There's no greater burden nor deeper honor than to endure the loss of a friend, a colleague, or a loved one in the service of our community and our nation. And Greg's legacy will have its place in our nation's history, as he so rightly deserves. It's a true honor to be here today to honor a man I not only considered my friend, but someone I've looked up to for most of my law enforcement career. I've been in law enforcement for about 20 years, and prior to the FBI, I was a member of the Terre Haute Police Department. That's where I met Greg. And Greg was the police officer that others wanted to be like, including me. And you're hearing a common theme as everybody talks about Greg. Greg was dedicated and relentless. He was an inspiration to so many people and so many officers, even when he didn't realize he was. Over time, Greg became not just a mentor to me, but one of my true friends on this department. I would oftentimes get suckered into going out with Greg, and it was usually when Lockhart would call and say him and Brian and Greg were going out, and they really had to twist my arm to go out with them. But it always stands out to me because Greg always treated me like I was always part of the group, even when I was that annoying rookie with all the questions that Chief Keene will attest to. I always had questions, always. I was always picking Greg's brain. He was extremely smart, but he tried to hide his intelligence. But being around him for a short time, you realized how smart he was. He was a student of knowledge. He was always trying to learn things. A saying that always reminded me of Greg is, the devil is in the details, right? When he got interested in a case or a subject, he had a relentless pursuit of looking into the details of whatever subject he was interested in. He would deconstruct interviews and information. He loved to read, and that went hand in hand with his investigative efforts. He would buy books to conduct research to help pick apart the details of a case. I remember picking Greg's brain every chance I got. Like I said, there are certain things that we learn from other people that we try to emulate. One thing I learned from Greg was that relentless pursuit and dedication to that research. But another thing that I learned from Greg was the way he treated people. Greg had a unique way of making you feel like he was your best friend. When he asked how you were doing, you felt like Greg genuinely cared, and he wasn't just asking out of politeness like some people do. I've tried to be like Greg in many ways throughout my career, and I hope in some ways I've lived up to those lessons that he taught me. As we've learned, Greg had a passion to learn and train and make officers better. If he learned something new, he always tried to mentor and teach other officers. He never tried to keep that knowledge to himself. Greg was always looking for ways to improve. He would teach on extremely important topics, such as active shooter training, and human trafficking investigations. He wanted to share his knowledge and experience to always make others better. But as you guys have learned, he was extremely humble. Just like when I learned Greg wrote a book, Narcops, and I got a copy, and Greg saw me reading it one day after, I think it was him and Denzel and Charlie, and all the DTF guys were out. And back in those days, you always hoped that they liked you because they would pick you to pull the cars over that they were running surveillance on. And there were a few of us that were lucky enough to be those guys. And he came in the roll call room, and he saw me reading his book. And he told me not to waste my time reading it. And I'm glad I did read it, because I got to pick his brain just a little more, even when he wasn't there. But that just shows you the humility that he had. He wrote an entire book of all his knowledge and said, "Oh, it's not that good. Don't waste your time." Greg never looked for recognition or a pat on the back. He was always the quiet professional, always there when you needed him. I've struggled this week to understand the senseless act of evil that took Greg from us. I don't know that I truly ever will, and I know we're all hurting, but Greg was so much more than a police officer, a detective, an FBI task force officer. He was a dad, a son, a brother, an uncle, a nephew, an instructor, and a friend. And I recently learned that he was also a professional ring bearer from a family member. He never made anyone feel bad. He had an infectious smile that made you feel like you had been his friend for a lifetime, even if you just met him. If there was someone struggling, he would help them pull through. Unfortunately, this department understands that and has been through this before, and Greg Ferency was there for all of us, in more ways than we knew we needed. A week ago today, I spent the entire day with Greg, something I'll cherish for the rest of my life. We were supposed to have 2 weeks working together, and that was cut short. But we spent most of the day just reminiscing, telling stories, catching up. He made me promise that I'd go to the FOP to honor our friend Brent Long that we lost 10 years ago. We talked about Rob Pitts and Brian Worley. We laughed about Richard Wallace, or Mad Dog as those on the department knew him, and all his crazy antics. We talked about all of our friends, all the guys that we'd worked with, and what we were doing. He genuinely cared about what I was doing at work and in my life, and we all talked in the FBI office about doing some human trafficking and child exploitation cases together. He asked about cases I'd worked on and what I was doing in my new position. When I asked Greg about some of his cases and what he was doing, we talked about some of the details, but with that Greg smile and his humble character, and I said, how are they going? He said, "We'll see." But I knew, like, Greg was relentless. I know how they were going. At one point during the day, Greg came over to where I was sitting and said, "Hey man, we gotta go." I asked where we were going, and he said, "Ham knows you're in town, and he's going to be mad if we don't go over to the PD." Now, for those of you that know Greg, he may have used a little bit more colorful language than that. So we went over to the police department, and I walked into the back into the roll call room to say hello to a few of the guys. What'd Greg do? Greg walked it through the entire police department to tell them that I was in town, and they needed to go say hello to me. That may seem like a small thing, but it meant the world to me. He made sure I got to see everyone we were friends with and to say hi. But that's who Greg was, always making sure people felt good and cared for. It'd be impossible to list and know all the people Greg positively impacted. He was truly one of a kind. To all the officers and detectives and agents and first responders, I challenge you to be like Greg. Do this job the right way. Be relentless. Be passionate. There are people that depend on you. This is not a job, it's a calling, and we must continue the fight that men and women like Greg Ferency have sacrificed so much for. I would also ask you to honor Greg by giving as much of yourself to those you love as you give to this job. Because without your family's love and support, it would not be possible to serve our communities and our nations the way we do. Greg taught us a lot, and as if you heard, it was one of his passions. And the other night, Greg's daughter Peyton and I were talking, and she said it best while we were talking about Greg. I couldn't help but think what she said was true for all of us. She looked at me and she said, "He had so much more to teach me." And she's right. I'm sorry for this pain you all are going through and you have to endure. I'm sorry we couldn't stop this senseless act of evil before it took Greg from us. But I'm so thankful Greg was a part of our lives. We're all better humans just for having him as our friend and colleague. I watched in amazement this week as I saw two of Greg's closest friends, Brent Stolting and Kevin Barrett, take countless calls and texts from other departments, agencies, and leaders around the world wishing to express their condolences because they knew Greg personally and were devastated with the news of what had happened. Uncountable numbers of federal agents from multiple agencies contacted me and expressed how heartbroken they were and how much they will miss working with Greg and how valuable he was to cases around this nation. If you could just bear with me, if Greg's family could just stand up for one moment for me. I want you to take a look around because this is your family. And I want you to see how much we're all hurting. And I want you guys to look at this. These are your family for life. And we're always going to be here to support you. I'm going to leave you with a Bible verse that reminds me of Greg and his character as a man. Psalm 82, verse 3 and 4. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, and rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. To Greg's parents, family, and Peyton and Nick, I want you to know how much I miss my friend. I want you to know how much we all miss our friend. It's been my absolute honor to spend the last week with you guys. I can't express how grateful I am to have had the privilege to be with you all. Peyton, you're always going to be stuck with the Three Musketeers. And from all of us that called Greg a friend and colleague, thank you for sharing Greg with us.